Welcome to this Excel library tutorial. In this video, I'll show you how to work with a pivot table in an Excel document using the Syncfusion .NET Excel library. The pivot table is a feature in Excel that helps summarize and organize data. Instead of showing every single row like a normal table, it groups the data and calculates totals or averages, so you can quickly see patterns. I begin by opening an existing ASP.NET Core application, where I've already installed the Syncfusion XlsIO .NET Core package. To learn how to get started with the Excel library, refer to the video link in the card above or the description below. First, I'll show you how to add a pivot table to an Excel document by clicking this button. I am going to add a pivot table to this document. To begin, I open the index.csv file, remove the existing code, and add a button for Add Pivot Table. To handle its event handler, I navigate to the Home Controller class and import the necessary namespace. Then, I define an action method with the return type action result. Inside this method, I initialize an instance of XlsIO and create an iApplication instance. I create a file stream instance to retrieve the existing Excel file using the appropriate file access options. I use this stream to open the workbook and access the worksheet that contains the data. I also create a new worksheet where the pivot table will be placed. I create a pivot cache using the range A1 to H50 from the worksheet. Using this cache, I create a pivot table named Pivot Table 1 and place it at cell A1 in the new worksheet. I configure the pivot table structure. First, I add one column field, which organizes the data horizontally. I add two row fields, which organize the data vertically. First, I access the field at index 5 and add a data field using the add method, passing the field, and naming it units, applying the sum function to compute the total. Similarly, I add another data field for the next index. After configuring the fields, I apply a built-in table style to enhance the appearance of the pivot table. To export the Excel file, I define a helper method called Export Workbook. This method creates a memory stream, saves the workbook to the stream, resets the stream position, and returns the file as a downloadable Excel document. I invoke this method, passing the workbook and the desired file name. I save and run the application. When I click the button, the Excel file is downloaded. As you can see, the pivot table is added as specified. Next, I'll show you how to edit an existing pivot table. I start by adding a button, Edit Pivot Table, and define an action method with the return type action result. Inside this method, I reuse the existing code with a few modifications. First, I change the file name and update the worksheet index to access. Then, I create a pivot table instance to access the first pivot table in the worksheet. To change the pivot table layout, I move the region field to the columns area and the employee field to the rows area. This organizes the data by region horizontally and by employee vertically. Next, I set the built-in table style to improve the appearance. I also update the output file name. When I click the button, the modified Excel file is downloaded. As you can see, the pivot table now has an updated layout and style. Finally, let's see how to remove a pivot table from an Excel document. I add a button labeled Remove Pivot Table and define an action method with the return type action result. Inside this method, I reuse the existing code with a few changes. I invoke the Remove method on the pivot tables collection and pass the name of the pivot table to delete it. After that, I update the output file name to reflect the change. When I click the button, The modified Excel file is downloaded. As you can see, the pivot table has been removed. That's a wrap. In this video, I have shown you how to work with a pivot table in an Excel document using the Syncfusion .NET Excel library. You can download this tutorial's working example from the GitHub link in the description below. I have also shared a link where you can learn about obtaining a free license key to use our document SDK through our community license if you qualify. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.